In the pantheon of elder dragons that we've met across Monster Hunter so far, Yama Tsukami and Yama Kurai stand as a somewhat odd pair, with their design and nature first introduced in the second game, based around the concept of floating islands. There's very little else in the series that quite resembles them. Not even the enormous cephalopod Narcocos comes close. The original definition for elder dragons in the series is creatures that cannot be classified based on their traits and sit outside of the standard ecosystem of the world, and based on these characteristics, Yama Tsukami and Yama Kurai certainly fit the bill. What they are, where they come from, and most of their evolutionary origins is unknown, and they seem more akin to small microcosms of ecosystems in themselves, with multiple species existing in symbiosis and reliant on them for their survival. In my videos so far I've looked at and focused on yokai. This one is instead going to look at something quite different, as certainly as far as I know there are no giant floating octopus islands in Japanese myth or folklore. Nope, rather we're going to examine a very specific feature of Yama Tsukami and Yama Kurai, its weapons and armour, the presence of Japanese motifs on them, and most importantly what this white tasseled rope on them is, which is officially known as a shimenawa. So with all that in mind, let's take a look and examine just what a shimenawa is and look in detail at Yama Tsukami and Yama Kurai and its weapons and armour. Shimenawa are ropes with important sacred connotations in Japanese Shinto and are made from rice straw or hemp. Their name means enclosing rope, and areas that are indeed enclosed by them are sacred and are considered to be ritually pure and can be small or truly immense in size. Typically, they also have these little zigzag-shaped pieces of paper, which are called shide. Shimenawa are typically used in sacred contexts, surrounding shrines or placed above the gates to one, but they can be placed in other spaces as well. Venerable or ancient objects are considered to contain spirits, and thus often have shimenawa around them as well, to denote their importance and pay homage to the sacred power within. Quite often this is done in particular for trees, and typically denotes a kodama, with its own spirit and acting as a protector for the forest. Interestingly, humans can also be enclosed by shimenawa, although only in very specific circumstances. That is to say, if you are a yokozuna, the highest rank in sumo. This might seem odd, almost like a form of blasphemy, but the reason why these highest ranking of rikishi wear these ropes is due to sumo's origins as a sport of the gods. When humans used to wrestle, they didn't just do so against other men, but also against the gods, and when a wrestler proves truly worthy, then he falls on the side of the gods for his fellow mortals to challenge in the gods' place. Almost like their champion, I suppose. This is the reason why a yokozuna can never lose the rank unless he chooses to retire, because no mortal person can make a decision about a yokozuna's worthiness, because he's already on the side of the gods themselves. Let's examine the equipment of Yama Tsukami before we look at Yama Kurai. For the majority of the weapons, I'll be looking at their Monster Hunter Online version, because it has the most complete set, and frankly the renders are the best from the game and easiest for me to access. The Yama Tsukami longsword may be based off the Saburi Bokken, an especially large wooden sword used for solo martial practice to build up muscle and hone technique in practitioners of various sword-based martial arts in Japan. These Saburi Bokken can be twice as heavy as regular training swords. Quite what the symbols on the blade's surface mean, I have no idea. It's something that's frankly bothered me ever since I first saw the weapon's design, because it could provide all manner of insights into the world's religion. In relation to Yama Tsukami, or perhaps the writing is some manner of prayer to go along with the sacred aspect of the shimenawa rope. By contrast to most of the weapons from Yama Tsukami, the sword and shield and the jewel blades make no use of any wood, moss, or even biological material by the looks of it. Either way, the sword and shield along with the jewel blade stand apart a bit by comparison to the other weapons and items created from Yama Tsukami, and I believe are related to Buddhist ritual objects rather than anything from the Shinto religion. I believe that the sword in the sword and shields case is based on Tibetan and Bhutanese Furba daggers. I hope I'm saying that right. These sacred objects typically have one side that has a three-edged blade, and The other end depicts three wrathful faces of Buddhas or deities. These items are typically pierced into the ground or into bowls in their use, unlike how they've been shown in popular culture, and in tantric uses are used for exorcism, killing demons, and meditation practices. I believe that the jewel blades are also ritual weapons, perhaps a even-sided kartika, although I shall admit that this is somewhat of a stretch. Kartika are also from Tibetan and Bhutanese Buddhism, and are distinctive flaying blades with hooks on one end, often fabulously decorated with images of Makara, which are fabulous sea monsters with elephant-like heads. These blades chop through egotistical delusion, which obstructs enlightenment, and the hook is said to represent compassion, pulling beings from suffering and guided by the clarity-giving properties of the vara at the top, which is another sacred image and object found not only in Buddhism but Hinduism as well. As a fitting follow-up for the sword and shield, I suspect that the Yama Tsukami greatsword from online might also be related to a Buddhist ritual object in an oblique sort of way. Take a look at this. I've often seen them referred to as Furba Dorje. I suspect that these might serve as the inspiration for the greatsword. It has the approximate shape and suspended blade, although it lacks many of the sacred nuances of the weapon like the vara or dorje, and the distinctive shape of the blade. Potential inspiration combines three sacred ritual objects into one. It might have been hard to carry across. The writing on the blade, if we could actually have it translated, could probably give us insight, if it ever meant anything at all, that is. But that's the greatsword for online, and it's worth also taking a look at the original form. Originally it was based off a very different sort of weapon, the war fan, also known as a gunbai, traditionally used by leaders to direct their forces and also as a sunshade. There are a few references to gunbai actually being used in combat, bar one. Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin were famous rivals, and frankly their relationship is a fascinating one. There is a story, perhaps anecdotal, of Kenshin bursting into Shingen's command tent during a battle and attacking him, only for the blow to be deflected by Shingen's war fan. Whether this actually occurred or is a colourful but untrue anecdote from the time is impossible to know, to be honest. On the other hand, the hunting horn, my favourite of Tsukami's weapons, is shaped like the shell of a conch. Conch shells are used throughout the world for their musical qualities, and this is no different in Japan, in which they are known as horogai, and even today there are still schools that teach how to play this instrument in Japan. Throughout history, horogai have been used in Buddhist religious rituals, and it's often associated with the shugendo practicing yamabushi, who use them to communicate across mountains and accompany the chanting of sutras. Much like the gunbai and drums, they were also used to signal and command on the battlefield as well. Indeed, many feudal daimyo of the samurai caste enlisted yamabushi skilled at the instrument just for this very purpose. Yama Tsukami's lance and gun lance have quite typical weapon designs, but both of their shields have these fierce, leering faces of them, reminiscent of demons. Japan, like many other countries, heavily features demons in its religious iconography, but not just as adversarial yokai, but also as gods and guardians. The ones depicted on the shields for the lance and the gun lance may be calling on the motif of the Mie, the distinctive statues that stand guard outside of Buddhist temples, or they might simply represent fierce protectors, carved on the shields to protect the hunter from monsters and perhaps even evil spirits. Yama Tsukami's bow is shaped not unlike a traditional Japanese yumi, with the grip about 2/3 of the way down the bow's length to make it asymmetrical. Yumi-style bows show up frequently in Monster Hunter weapon designs, as does the next feature. These rays call, of course, upon those of the sun, which the head of the Japanese pantheon, Amaterasu no Mikoto, is the goddess of. Again, this is not the first time sun ray motifs have turned up on bows in Monster Hunter, but seeing the number of Shinto connections in Yama Tsukami's equipment, it certainly fits. To be honest, the Yama Tsukami hammer is a difficult one to discuss. Its online version appears to simply be a large block of wood, and without any ability to actually look at it online and look at the weapon's other angles and aspects, all I can do is speculate that it was potentially inspired by the shape of Japanese taiko drums or sake barrels. Taiko drums have been used in Shinto ritual for centuries, both as a way to provide music, attract the attention of the gods, and organize parades and other religious events. The Monster Hunter Frontier version of the hammer is also a large block of wood, similar in design, but with a distinctive carved face that rather reminds me of a tengu, the crow-like spirits inhabiting the mountains of Japan in many legends. It also rather resembles a samurai's mempo mask. Either way, it has something a bit more concrete to speculate on than the hammer's online variant. There's less to be said for Yama Kurei's weapons, unfortunately, but two of them and its armor are definitely worth looking into. The bow lacks the Yama Tsukami's sun motif and goes for another instead. Do you see the four golden comma-like shapes? These are quite innocuous, but they're called magatama, and are important as a religious image in Japan. First appearing around 1300 BC, magatama beads were also known as jewels, and it's said that the goddess Amaterasu created many of Japan's deities by biting a great number of magatama that were presented to her and blowing out the dust to create new gods. One special magatama is even one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, called the Yasakani no Magatama. Of all of the 3 imperial regalia, magatama is the only one never to have been broken or lost, or at least recorded to be, and is quite possibly the only original of the 3. The Yama Kurei hunting horn looks like this, and is based on a gourd, grown throughout the world for their use as a fruit and for creating containers once they've been dried and hollowed out. For much of Japan's history, the gourd was the item of choice for carrying liquid on a journey. Even today, gourd-shaped sake bottles made of porcelain are popular. Fascinatingly, gourds can even be used to make musical objects. Whilst much of the world uses dried gourds to make percussion instruments, certain groups in Asia use them to create a sort of flute by the name of a hulusi, and they even look a great deal like the Yama Kurei hunting horn. Finally, onto the armor. Both the male and female Blade Master and Gunner outfits make use of the Shimenawa theme, and the female sets have these distinctive sashes that float around the neck. This is quite a common motif in Japanese myth and folklore, and they're called hagoromo sashes, scarves of thin silk that are lifted and float around a person. Hagoromo sashes act as a sort of visual shorthand to accent or demonstrate a person's divinity in artwork, an immediate way to convey their importance to those observing it. The male armor is also themed on the divine, but in a very different way, calling upon aspects of the Shinto gods Raijin and Fujin, whom I mentioned in my video on the divine serpents of Rise. The 5 shapes behind the Blade Master's head represent Raijin's drums, with which he calls down thunder, and the large sealed bag around the gunners represents Fujin's bag of wind. Both sets also have this quite fearsome, even demonic eyebrows and masks. That suits the pair of gods as well. Well, there we go with the historical and religious significance of Yama Tsukami and Yama Kurei's equipment. I know this is something of a departure from my usual topic and style, but I hope you enjoyed this exploration of such bizarre Elder Dragon's equipment. I plan to do a similar video for Matsumaga Suchi at some point in the future, because there's an absolute wealth of things to look into with that monster as well, and I'll have an excuse to talk about one of my favourite Elder Dragons. But still, what do you guys think about Yama Tsukami and Yama Kurei and their equipment? It's been so long since a main installment of the series included these 2 big balloon boys that I would love to see them used again. Alongside Kirin, they were the first How Is This Even an Elder Dragons in the series. They've yet to be topped in how bizarre they are. But until next time, happy hunting everyone.